Any other questions from, I think, up the back? And if we can get a maybe we can come over this side. And
Hi. My question, given that women are the majority of the world's food growers, given that women, when they earn additional income, will put 90% of that back into their families and communities, and given that women are very often excluded from decisions around land use, I'm interested in the panel's views on what role gender equality might play in creating a sustainable future.
Well, let me say very quickly that, sorry.
No, great. Tim.
Being a bloke, I can speak authoritatively on this. There's no magic bullet to beat poverty. The closest we've got is gender empowerment, though. That is the closest, and you cited in your question really the reason. For every dollar a man earns, 40 cents goes back to the kids. For every dollar a woman earns, 90 cents goes back to the kids. We know that when it comes to dealing with the ticking population bomb, it's the same issue. For every year a girl stays in school, she'll have 1.2 less kids. It's funny to think of education as a contraception, I know, but with power, with numeracy, with literacy, being able to set up a roadside stall, being able to then invest that in her family's well-being is extraordinarily important. So when it comes to land use, exactly the same issue. I'm just back from Zimbabwe. We did a gender audit of even some of our staff. We have 1,000 staff there, and pretty scary. The number of women who said their Shona mothers would say to them the night before the wedding, you know, if he doesn't beat you in the first week of marriage, he doesn't love you. And when he takes the grain to market and comes back with a likely story that he got robbed and he doesn't have any of the proceeds, you don't dare ask a question. That's his business. And if you're not sure about the seed he's harvesting, you think you've got a better idea, you don't speak up. That's his business. So we have profound challenges still to go in dealing with gender empowerment for the benefit of better land use, for better development outcomes.
Anne-Marie, did you want to?
Well, you know, Tim has well and truly summed it up, but, you know, the whole issue of gender equity, or ensuring that women have appropriate economic and political power, is something that so much lip service is given to. But the reality is very different. Let me give you an example just in Australia. There's no one between the Prime Minister and maybe a First Assistant Secretary who's a woman working on Australia's aid program. So, you know, how are you going to get that constant reminder, because frankly you often have to be a girl to remember it, because you're reminded of it yourself so often. You know, you've got to make sure that there are enough women in those powerful positions to ensure that you do get that political equity. Because without political equity, often you won't get economic equity. They both go together. And that is absolutely fundamental. And I do get depressed about one thing. I see this tremendous intelligence and support for so many global issues, but often that the women's equity is getting lost. It really is getting lost.
Yes, just waving.
Sorry, this gentleman up here.
Okay, certainly you're keeping track of that.
Thanks. I better thank the girl on the microphone for doing a big
She's doing a
dive
great job.
across. Look, I'm a farmer, and I'm just interested to hear about the role of secondary processing. I know, for example, in Victoria, where I'm from, 40 shipping containers a day of dehydrated milk go out the port. And that's great. We supply plenty of milk around the world. The opportunities of secondary processing in some of our developing countries, I think that's key, so that they can get a product that they can then put it into the marketplace into the West. So I'm just interested, how do we as a rich Western community and aid organisations and farmers or individuals play a role in helping create the secondary processing, so what people who are small farmers produce can find its way into a market?
Who wants to pick that one up?
Fair
Harriet?
trade issue, I think. I think it is, yeah.
Well, I think you've put your finger on a key issue, and in particular, that so much of the value is added to products in processing. That the raw material, although logically that's where most of the value should be, because sometimes it takes a whole year to grow coffee or cocoa, actually that gets the least value, and it's all the other stages where more of the value is added. And so some of that goes back, I think, to getting the right international trade agreements. It's ending the tariff barriers, which were specifically erected to stop developing countries processing products, so that if you sell raw coffee beans, they come in tariff-free. If they're semi-processed, it's 5%. If they're fully processed, it's 10, 15%. Clear disincentives to any developing country to do the processing at home. And so I think that would be the first thing to do, is to actually really take down those unfair tariff barriers. Personally, well, I believe allowing developing countries to protect their own nascent industries while they grow and develop. So I think it's not about reciprocity here. It's about having a deal that's fair for countries seeking to tackle poverty, because it will create opportunities for us. And I think you give a great example there about how Australia is a trading nation, and that has to be a two-way street that can work both ways. I think the other key is absolutely what companies can do to increasingly locate their operations, the processing and the value adding within developing countries. So that, for example, overwhelmingly, we were talking about Ghana's cocoa industry, most of the cocoa beans are exported raw or semi-processed. So what can those companies do to take it all the way to the final stage of processing within Ghana? And a lot of that can be about getting, again, the policy framework to encourage companies to invest, getting the incentive right. But also that's where I think aid agencies can, again, play a critical role in encouraging manufacturing and working with businesses to really encourage them to do that and to really add more value in developing countries, which ultimately can also be in their financial interests, because it can also be cheaper, of course, to process further there. And so hopefully that really will be the next stage, actually, that many developing countries can come to, if we can get the trading overall regime right to encourage that.
Can I say I think there's a role for business here. Aid agencies play that role. It's advocacy. But Milton Friedman once said that the role of business is to increase profits as long as it plays within the rules of the game. I think now we know business has a duty to also be criticising, adjusting those rules, because the rules of the game in terms of trade really hurt a whole lot of poor countries. And the value add factor is a great example. And I think business equally has a role to play in asking questions of those rules.
I think, look, it's 7:25, so I think I'll just draw a line, and I'm sorry if you missed out on your questions, because I know there's state of origin and other issues on tonight. Although a farmer from Victoria in a suit, I think it's great to have you here. But